Hey everybody, Josh the RV Nerd here at Bish's RV with another monthly-ish installment of our Industry Update series. There's some crazy stuff that all of a sudden just broke loose in the industry. I want to do the best that I can here to try to provide a little bit of frame of reference, a lens for some of the weird things, happenings, and questions that are going on out there. Like recently, somebody asked me, hey Josh, are the manufacturers slamming the brakes on RV production right now? What is going on with RV pricing, and what do you predict will happen through the remainder of the season? What's going on with the used RV market? That's a big thing I haven't talked about a lot. Also something that I don't know if I haven't gotten into for like a year. What is the current state of, how are interest rates for RV loans out there? I want to talk about some supply chain things, specifically using RV generators as kind of a barometer and a litmus test for that, as sort of a symptom of the way things are working and panning out there. A quick little update on the big natural disaster that basically totally shut down Yellowstone Park for a little bit, and how they're still trying to put the pieces of that puzzle back together. And a little thing here, kind of an update on what something I mentioned last month. You may want to push pause on the plans to dive into the Starlink internet trend right now, at least for the time being. Maybe not. We're going to dive into all that and more. If you appreciate the way that we kind of pull the curtain back and give you this kind of fair insight and information, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And as we go through this, please leave me some comments. Let me know, what you see, what you think, if your experience is the same or different or anything like that. And remember, I chapter mark these videos so you can hop around to the topics that most specifically interest you. Although if you feel like watching the whole thing and sharing with me, well, that's okay too. Let's get started. But first and most importantly, a word from our sponsor. I don't have sponsors. I don't do sponsored content. I want my content to be like my grandfather's cigarettes. Unfiltered. Also very important, I need to feed my Pokemon buddy so I can get my walking credit as I wander aimlessly around the lot while talking to you today. Okay, important stuff handled. What are we looking at here? So the question of, is the industry, are the builders hitting the brakes on build production? It did sound like that was going to happen. Last month I put an update out there, said manufacturers are starting to slow production down a little bit. And then right after that video came out, like 2 or 3 days later, there were some big potential rumors that went around, like this brand, that brand, they're taking a month off, they're taking 2 months off, like everybody's shutting down production. That hasn't exactly come to pass, not across the board the way everyone thought. There are some brands who are taking some extended time off, but not like everyone is going to stop building. And I'm glad to see that, because there's a lot of customers who have already, handed things like down payments and deposits to various dealerships and said, I want you to custom order me or build me one with, these widgets and whiz bangs. And I would hate to see all those get pushed back another 2 months and log jam this thing even further. So that hasn't exactly come to pass. We're going to talk a little bit more how different brands have done this. But it kind of, it opens into the question. I think it's important to help to shape the entire conversation for most of this video. Like, what is actually happening? How much is being produced? So let's get this out of the way. Let's just state this. There are fewer RVs being purchased now than there were last year. But what does that mean? Well, first of all, it means I need to turn around and walk the other direction before I go walking into traffic with a camera in my hands, although I'm sure there's a TikTok video where that's happened before. What I'm getting at here is last year, something like 600,000 RVs were produced. And 92% of those were sold within that year. Only about 50,000 of the RVs built last year rolled over into this year. That is basically almost like an all-time record low. So the manufacturers had their foots on the pedal, building like crazy, and early projections this year was that there was going to be a need to build another 600,000 RVs. That isn't coming to pass. But there's still going to be a lot. There's going to be current estimates and targets, with current tracing and rubbing the crystal ball, 8-ball forecasting, is that there's probably still going to be over 500,000 built this year. We are currently on track and projected, even though there's fewer RVs being sold this year than last year. The doom and gloomers love to come out when they hear that. The fact is, this is still looking to be the second best year ever on record in terms of RV sales. So the industry is not unhealthy currently whatsoever. It's not to say that it couldn't get there, but currently at the time of this broadcast, that's really not the case. There are ways that some slowdowns are good, and there's some ways that some of these manufacturer building slowdowns are very concerning to me. And here's what I mean by that. Some manufacturers have simply said, instead of, I'm just going to throw a number out there, instead of 10 or 20 or whatever their target number of units is per day, which can vary by brand, and if the camper's big or small, they can make more or less in a day. But we're going to do 10 or 20% less than that per day. We're going to keep building 5 days a week, but we're going to build less per day. That I like to hear. Now, that is more expensive for an RV producer because you're building fewer RVs, you're making less money because you're, making fewer things that make you money, but you're paying the same amount of labor time effectively. Well, that very quickly eats into your profit margins, and that's not, in that sense, good business practice, although taking care of a customer is never a bad business practice. When the workers have more time to put this stuff together, more time per station, when it's not like, well, every 15 minutes the line moves forward whether your job's done or not, which is unfortunately something that does sometimes happen in this industry. Obviously, you can tell I don't like that, and obviously I don't sugarcoat things. I just try to put them out there for you. When there's more time being done, you end up with a better product. And I will never say, I've never said any RV is ever perfect, but it gives you a lot better chance of something being done right when somebody spends more time building it. That's why there's certain high dollar, low volume brands that are just legendary for the good kind of things they put out there. But some manufacturers are doing things like laying off a percentage of their workforce or dropping down to 3 or 4 day production, but keeping up at the same pace during those smaller, the days that they are operating. My concern with that is you're not really addressing one of the core things that the industry needs right now, and that's just stuff getting put together better. That wouldn't offend anybody. I have seen improvements in that regard. I would like to continue to see more improvements in that regard. But I'm concerned that if you start laying people off, or you start limiting the number of days they're working and limiting their paycheck, those people are going to go find employment somewhere else where they can have a more either higher volume paycheck or just a more consistent paycheck that they can rely upon. The problem with that is now you're losing staff who are at least somewhat trained on how to build your product, and they're moving on to something else that they're not really familiar with how they build, and then eventually their position needs to get refilled back at the original company, and then you have someone who's probably not well prepared to do that job kind of thrown directly into the fire, and I feel like it's this recurring damaging cycle that the industry's kind of got itself in here. And unless the manufacturers are willing to keep their staff, who they've already invested training time into, and invest some more money in them by keeping them on during a not #1 record sales year time, those are the brands that I think are going to continue to succeed and put out some better products. I've got some information and some insights, a little bit of a discussion on this later in the video on like which brands might be doing that, which brands might not, because unfortunately that's not the kind of thing a lot of manufacturers like to broadcast. Hey, we're going to be laying people off. They don't like to go publicly broadcasting that. Even with the people I know, they tend to be pretty tight-lipped about that stuff. So what's happening with RV pricing? I'm going to take a look at the new RV market first and the used RV market next. We've been hearing for the better part of about 2 years,
all this industry is about to burst. It's all about to fall apart and pricing's going to plummet. We're just going to get some steals of deals.
It still does not seem to be happening yet. I fully acknowledge why people say and feel that way. It just doesn't seem to be happening yet. Again, I think it's important to recognize that, yes, sales are down versus last year, but we're probably still looking at the second best year overall in RV sales that are out there. What seems to be happening right now is that something I've been hoping would happen for about 1.5 years seems to finally be happening, and that appears to be that RV pricing has largely plateaued. Where we saw the last 2 years, we saw the most unprecedented increase in pricing out there that we've ever seen, right? That's not a secret. That's not a mystery. If you're brand new to this industry, if you've just started looking into RVing, that's a thing that very real happened. It seems to have largely flatlined and stagnated, though. I'm not seeing pricing updates from manufacturers like every 2 weeks delivered into my email box the way that I was seeing them. Everything appears to be kind of flat. Interestingly, one of the kind of good, strong, healthy barometers for the way things are going in the industry tends to be auction pricing of used RVs. And what we're seeing is that whether it's towable or motorized, the average price of things coming across the block at auctions tends to be up 2.5% to 5%. So even though there are plenty of RVs available in the market, both new and used from dealerships and private individuals, the general going rate for things seems to be strong. And interestingly, average sale price of used motorhomes nationally is up this year versus last year, which that one really kind of surprised me. But those are all indicators, again, of a healthy, strong RV sales year, despite all the various weird factors. A dip in RV sales is sometimes looked at as an economic indicator for a precursor to a recession. So a lot of people have been throwing that word around right there. If we are looking, and understand, there are a million different factors to consider, but if we're looking at the RV industry as a potential factor or indicator there, it doesn't appear that that will be a thing that will be happening anytime soon. And in a somewhat encouraging recent announcement, Winnebago's CEO has basically said that their pricing has reached, peak levels. They have realized and they have publicly acknowledged they can't really increase their pricing any more than it is. They can't pass along pricing increases anymore to dealerships and or their consumers. And that's cool. That's encouraging to hear. It does feel like, oh gosh, maybe we finally have hit the ceiling of this thing. But at the same time, in that same address, the same CEO also said, we also don't plan on rolling back prices anytime soon either. So there's that. So what does that mean in the way of used market pricing? Well, this is all either good news or bad news, depending on exactly what it is you're looking to accomplish. The thing here to always understand is the used RV market pricing is always just bolted onto and totally directly related to the price of new RV market pricing. Because the question, whether you're selling the RV or a dealership selling the RV is, okay, this one's used, how much less than new does it have to be before it becomes attractive to someone and they will buy it? There's things like NADA or Blue Book guides, but they're guides, not Bibles, for a reason, So what that means right now is currently the pricing in the used RV market is holding very strong. Like I said, even at auctions, they are, what was it, blackbook.com or something like that, which is a very reliable source for this stuff. They were seeing, towable and motorized going for more basically across the auction block than it was previously. That means that, if you have an RV currently and you're looking to sell it for any reason, it's holding its value very strong. That also means that if you're looking to get into the RV market and you're looking to purchase a used RV, that unfortunately their values are holding very strong. Like I said, it's good news or bad news depending on which side of the coin you're on. And again, I hope you appreciate that I'm willing to have conversations like this on things that sometimes sound very discouraging to a potential buyer. I feel very strongly these are things that you're going to learn and you're going to find out yourself, whether I tell them to you or not. And why beat around the bush? Let's just go ahead and hit the conversation head on and respect one another and spend our time effectively, I'm still predicting something's going to happen this fall, though, that I've been predicting for a little while, and it seems like a lot of my predictions, I've been ahead of my time, but only by a little bit. I still think this fall the manufacturers are going to reinstitute their dealer volume purchasing discount packages in some form or another. The moment that happens, the moment new RVs are suddenly more affordable than they were, used RV pricing, bam, is going to take an equivalent shot. Because again, the question is, how much less than new does used have to be before I buy it? Now, what I don't think will happen, I don't think you will see like an overnight in like October or September, you're just going to see used pricing go down 10% or anything like that. Because whether you already own a used RV or whether we already own as dealers, not just Bish's, but any dealer, this is a national thing. If we already own a used RV for X dollars, we can't just suddenly take less than X dollars for it across the board at our entire dealership. We're going to have to work our way out of that. And there are some cute little mathematical ways that dollars can be shifted off of one unit to another, you know, at a dealership level, but that's slow and that takes time. Again, that's not just an overnight process to heal that inventory. So right now, used RV values are very strong. This fall, I personally am predicting that they will take a little bit of a chunk down, but I've kind of been predicting that for a little bit and it hasn't happened yet, so what do I know? What do you think's gonna happen? And now a topic I don't know that I've talked very much about, but it was another viewer requested thing that I'm hitting on here today. What's going on with interest rates in terms of RV loans? Rates have crept up over the last couple of years, not at the speed or severity I would have expected. And I think it's important to recognize that RV interest rates or loans right now are still very low compared to what they were historically, but they have gone up, and anything more than it used to be is certainly an increase, and that's worth considering because that might be the thing that does or doesn't price somebody out of the market, you know, your payment. Versus say about 2 years ago, we have seen where rates have crept up about 1 to 2 solid percent. When we are just estimating rough payments for someone, we tend to estimate around 6.99% on a new RV. We tend to estimate around 8.99% on a used RV. Now, those are just, again, rough starter, give us a good idea kind of guidelines. It is possible to secure better rates than those that I just described here. It is also possible to get a same as new finance rate on a used RV. There's some criteria that go into that, and it does vary a little bit by lender to lender. A little aside note for you on that. If the RV you're looking at is within 5 years of the current model year, and I just lost my balance, I almost fell down. If the used RV you're looking at is within 5 model years of current, so right now the 22s are out, the 23s are going to be out, basically 2018 and newer, it can qualify for same as new financing, assuming you have the other criteria that the banker wants to see. Like a lot of times it's based off credit scores and 100 other things. But we have seen these rates creep up a little bit. You know, compared to when I first got into this business, we were just cracking into 7.99% interest rates on brand new RVs if you were just smoking good qualified. So rates are still down quite a bit overall as compared to where they were historically. RV pricing has shot up enough, though, unfortunately, that you know, your payments overall on average have gone up accordingly. That's an unfortunate factor. But again, anything more than it used to be is more than it used to be and worth considering. That is another one of those things I hope you appreciate that I'm willing to share, because telling people that their interest rates go up and their payments go up is a very good way to get people to not want to buy RVs. But I feel very confidently, whether I told you now or whether you found out at the finance officer's desk, either way you were going to find out, and I don't mind having a real conversation with folks. Now, retouching on the topic of RV part supply, this is the topic that basically just dominated my entire last year's series of industry updates. So, but you haven't heard me talk about that a lot this year. That's because by and large, things are better. Not all the way there, but they're way better than they used to be. And someone, the thing that kind of spurred me on this one is one of our viewers specifically asked, like, what are you seeing in terms of generator availability? I thought that's actually a really good example of kind of the state of the part supply side of the industry. So I did some asking around, I did some digging around, and what I'm finding right now is that portable, like standalone generators, Hondas, Yamahas, owning portable generators, things like that are, for the most part, pretty readily available, whereas last year, they just didn't exist. They were sold out, with the exception of a couple major retailers, like Harbor Freight was able to kind of, you know, keep their own supply, but a couple of major retailers really flexed their muscles and pushed their weight, and they kept inventory, in the same way that some bigger RV dealership groups had inventory the last couple of years, and some smaller groups didn't. Same thing. In terms of onboard built-in generators on RVs, though, the NPS generators, which are the Yamaha generators built by some other company, and Yamaha hates it when I call them Yamaha generators, but they still ship with the Yamaha owner's manual. Sorry, by the way. those are pretty much readily available. So like toy hauler manufacturers or whoever, some motorhome builders who are using those generators, those are pretty much readily available, which is cool. Onan onboards are more high volume, popular overall. As a result, they're doing pretty good. There's still some times when they'll run into a little bit of a delay to the manufacturers, but for the most part, at this point, if you want to order an RV from a manufacturer that has an option for an Onan generator, you can pretty much get that. The generator is not like a big 6-month delay like it was. But I made a very specific statement right there to the manufacturers. There are still some of these things that like you're seeing them come in on the new RVs, but for an individual or even sometimes even as a dealership to order some of this stuff, it is still sometimes pretty slim pickings. So there's still a little bit of a speed bump there, but it's not a roadblock like it used to be, if that makes sense. And this conversation will vary, pretty significantly from one, like if we're talking toilets or if we're talking ladders, if we're talking generators, those are 3 separate conversations. But overall, you're finding a lot of that where the manufacturers are basically getting what they need. Filtering that into the world of aftermarket, that is not necessarily impossible. It's a lot slower, and in some cases, not an issue, and in some cases, still an issue. It really depends on the widget. But in terms of the new RVs coming in, they're pretty much a complete product, unlike previous years where we're like, well, we'll get you a microwave if we can. And now, a nasty topic. The state of RV service. This is a tough one. We are still on the service side of things, still reeling basically from the problems of the primary COVID area. You know, for the most part, our lives have resumed fairly normal. Not 100%, but for the most part, we're kind of back to like, 2019-ish lifestyles. I think we can all agree. Just more streaming TV and less movie theaters, it seems like. But because the manufacturers are able to get their parts, but again, getting some of those parts fulfilled and moved down to the individual dealership level, that has been a bit of a problem. Now, what that means is that there's generally painfully, annoyingly slow, warranty and or service fulfillment through dealerships, and largely not to none of their own fault. It's just they can't seem to get the parts to necessarily take care of things. It's case by case, and it is getting better. But what is creating a bit of a problem and a negative feedback loop right here, one of the biggest roadblocks in the RV industry right now, is the fact that during that primary COVID era, there were so many people who we couldn't get the part for them at the time, and they just worked through it, or they just said, I'm not even going to try to deal with it. There was a glut and a backlog of service needs generated during that time over the last 2 years that now people are saying, okay, well, it seems like all of a sudden there's been this wave of we want to get this thing resolved. Now, an interesting statistic for you that kind of goes along with this, the year of RV ownership that typically has the largest number of warranty needs is actually year number 2. So, it's not an accident. I think that most RVs have a 1-year warranty. Again, I'm being very candid and not pulling a lot of punches about this here. I don't love anything that I'm saying, but these are the facts, man. What I'm getting at, though, is we're hitting that era where a lot of things were purchased, not a lot of things were serviced or even able to be serviced, and now everybody wants their thing fixed all at once. And it's creating problems. It's creating problems. We have had to actually adjust some of our policies to set better expectations for clients, helping them understand that I don't want to give you the concept that we can just necessarily come up with a fast solution and turnaround for you on different things. And again, I don't love a single thing that I'm sharing with you right here, and we are certainly doing our best, but there's just a backlog of things that need to get fulfilled before we can really get our heads back above water. It will get there over time, but what it's going to take is just a lot of time, and it's going to be a while, unfortunately, I think, before we feel like the service side of the industry is even remotely caught up. Man, I don't like that. And now something away from industry stuff and more into the lifestyle. In case you were living under a rock and hadn't heard, there were some massive, virtually unprecedented floods that unfortunately affected Yellowstone National Park that literally just shut it down. It ate the roads. It straight washed away, eroded, munched the roads that were out there, and it shut the park down. And there have been, emergency services working on reestablishing, routing through there, because there's not a whole lot of roads that go through that whole area. It's affected a lot of the nearby towns in all kinds of crazy, unexpected ways. But where they are at right now is Yellowstone is reopened, but they're doing a special, whether you can get in or not on a given day, literally just depends on the digits on your license. Unfortunately, they just had to come up with something so they could allow some people into the park to enjoy it without allowing just everybody and their brother to come in. There's some very special. What I'll do, I will leave a link to you in the video description if you're curious about this. To the full detailed breakdown of this. I don't want to bog down this entire thing with that. But long story short, if your license plate ends in an even or an odd number, depends on whether you can get in or not. And they have all kinds of different things, whether you're coming with a group of people, if you're coming with an RV, and that's all explained right there. So if you were curious about that, if you hadn't heard, Yellowstone is reopened, but only on the South Loop and only for limited access, effectively. The northern loop, the northern section of Yellowstone, is unfortunately still a mess, and there is absolutely no estimated data as to when that is going to be reopened. And unfortunately, it may be quite a long time before folks are able to get back up into that area. And it was about a month ago. I stood pretty much where I'm standing right now, and I shared the news that Starlink for RVs was now available. That is the SpaceX satellite-based internet service that previously was available only to residential households, suddenly becoming available to RVers. At the time, the people I knew and I trusted who had talked about this were saying that they had been getting just fantastic blazing fast speeds on this, even though they were in areas of deprioritized service. If you're not familiar with the way Starlink works, there's a couple different versions of the service, but the residential household service, you basically say, I live at this location, and if Starlink is available in your area, you get these really nice fast speeds. Now there might be, there's a roaming service that is basically like the RV service that if you're in these areas and it's not your primary zone, you can still get internet, but you're going to get whatever bandwidth is basically left over that the residential people aren't enjoying already. And at first, the people who were using it were just enjoying excellent speeds and services. But what's happened here is because Starlink is not necessarily available in every area of the country yet, and they do not have all the satellites in the sky that they want to have to help power this thing, and that's a slow process of building that up, and a very expensive one at that, I would imagine. I don't know. I've never launched a satellite into space, if you can believe that. Although one time as a kid, I did, shake up a bottle of Mountain Dew and spike it on the ground to see how high it would fly, and unfortunately just flew back and hit me in the head, which might explain a lot of things about me. But my point here is there were a bunch of people who were either looking for that magic solution to have good, fast, reliable, mobile, in the middle of nowhere internet. There were also a bunch of people on the residential waiting list that went, wait a minute, there's no waiting list for this roaming service? So what if it's deprioritized? If it's still fast enough, I'll take it. And a lot of people jumped onto it very quickly. Where it's been a problem is in the more populated areas of the country, and it sounds like the biggest reports I'm finding is more in the eastern side of the country, which is where the most of us live. The highest concentration of U.S. citizens are living on the east side of the country. They spider web right across the lips. Oh God, I hate that. Now it feels like it's in my. All right, what was I even saying? Okay, where there's a high concentration of people. SpaceX, Starlink went, ooh, crap, this is a problem. So at night, basically deprioritized roaming customers, the RV people, and a lot of people who bought RV Starlink to put in their houses, they're getting throttled down to virtually unusable internet, like to the equivalent of like a cell phone 2G signal or something like that, and in some cases worse. So it's one of those things that it will get better with time. And, you know, Starlink isn't even available in every area of the country yet, but it will get better with time. It just might want to be one of those things in your area, in your region. You may want to try to branch out, look out, and ask around locally. Is there anyone who's using this? What kind of speeds and services are you enjoying? Before you go spending the money on the hardware. The good news is, at least anyone who bought the RV service, you can pause it until you decide to turn it back on. That's one of the benefits of the RV thing there, but you may want to do some investigating before taking your internet to the stars. And finally, this is just a little quick note, something that you might hear me report in some future updates. RVDA has just opened up their DSI voting, basically, their dealer satisfaction votes. This is something that happens every year. I've talked about, people have been worried about, you know, quality concerns on a lot of brands. I think a good place to start is by looking at the brands that were voted, you know, best of the best, by in terms areas like not just which ones could I sell the most, but which ones came in with the fewest problems up front, which brands gave me the best support after the fact, and that voting process is about to begin again for the 22 model year. So in a month or two or whatever here, I'll have a new list for you of the brands that have stepped up and delivered most consistently the best products and the best support out there. So if you're not quite in the market yet and you're not sure about this brand or that brand, that might be a little nudge factor one way or the other for you that you'll be able to look forward to see maybe which brand might be one worth purchasing, whether it's your first one or your next one. But again, I would really like to hear from you folks. You've heard me yammer around long enough by now. It's time for me to start peeling through the comment section and see what you have to say. You know, where do you live in the country? What sort of experiences have you had with Starlink? Do you have service success or horror stories or anything like that? Feel free, share the good with the bad, as long as it's fair. I'm always happy to take a look at it, and I think it's important for folks to hear more than just what I have to say about it, because like I have ideas and I have insights, but there's a lot of you out there that have some actual hands-on experience that I think frankly trumps anything that I could possibly throw out there. So if you have something to add, make sure you hit that little comment button and type something out for us. And if you appreciate that we give you a place to share your voice like that, and a place is willing to share the good, the bad, with the ugly, with everything in between, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button and join us on the next one. We put out videos like this that's news and informative. We have tips and tricks, and of course, just a massive library of RV reviews for you, where we show you, even in those, the good, the bad, with the ugly, with everything in between. We want to earn your business, and when you're ready, we're ready. But in the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. So take care, stay safe, have fun, and happy camping, everyone.